the meaning of diseases. Found on page 254. There are two mysteries which are often spoken of in the Bible, the mystery of iniquity and the mystery of God. Ephesians 1, 9-3, 2 Thessalonians 2, 7, Revelation 17:5. It's been the author's intention throughout this book to clearly show how ignorant we have been concerning God, and it is equally evident that we are ignorant about Satan. It has been stated many, many times in this book that one understands the invisible things by looking at the visible things. Romans 1:20. Satan is a spirit, and as such he is invisible. However, God in his justice has made it possible for one to understand the workings of Satan by our observation of the disease processes or conditions which affect our physical bodies. Accepting the fact that our physical bodies in their normal functioning reflect God in manifold ways, then one must accept the fact that our bodies in disease states or abnormal functioning reflect Satan. In addition, it is also noteworthy that as there are many disease conditions acting in diverse ways, there are many manifestations of the devil which deceive and beguile us day by day. Let it be said here that the author is not intending to say that one necessarily becomes sick or diseased because he is devilish or has sinned, but is saying that all diseases manifest or reflect how Satan works or accomplishes his end, which is death. Do you recall when Jesus healed the blind man who had been blind from birth that he was asked, "Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him." John 9, 2-3. Thus, it was God's purpose to manifest in a visible way the workings of the devil so that man could have no excuse. Nevertheless, the author would have you believe that diseases or sicknesses, on the other hand, can be a direct result of devilish or satanic influences in an individual. Let us witness the sentence that God pronounced on Adam after he had sinned. God said to Adam, "Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee." Genesis 3, 17-18. Now these diseases are thorns and thistles as far as man is concerned. They prick him on every side. Man has become illuminated with considerable information regarding disease processes, but there is yet a great deal that he has not been exposed to. He is aware of at least the following. 1. There is no tissue or organ in the body that is invulnerable to disease. 2. Disease can be death-dealing. 3. Disease is ever present and will remain as long as man remains in his physical state. 4. Diseases are transmittable from one person to another in many instances. 5. Disease is already present in the body before physical signs or symptoms are recognizable. 6. The longer a disease remains in a body, the harder it is to eradicate, and the lesser the chance of eradication. 7. A diseased organ or tissue in a body may cause similar diseases of other organs or tissues. 8. A diseased organ or tissue, once apparently healed, often relapses, and the recurrent condition is worse than the former condition. 9. Some diseases are hereditary and passed along from generation to generation in a family tree. Let us briefly examine each of these facts about disease in comparing it with the satanic spirit. In reference to number 1, when Adam transgressed, all of the human race was concluded under sin. Galatians 3:22. Insomuch as Adam represents the whole human race, and we are all descendants from him, it is plain to see that each organ or tissue, being members of our own body, bear the same relationship to it as we do to Adam. In other words, each organ is a member of the body, and each person is a member of the whole human race which came out of Adam's body. Accordingly, as each one of us is born in sin, Psalms 51:5, there is likewise no organ or tissue which is exempt from disease. Number 2, hardly needs an explanation, for everyone knows that the wages of sin is death. Romans 6:23, just as the end result of many diseases is death. Concerning number 3, man's earliest writings carry accounts of sicknesses or diseases, and the present scene does not indicate any let-up in sickness or the overall incidence of diseases. Likewise, those old satanic spirits which were cast out of heaven before the earthly creation are reserved until the day of judgment, 2 Peter 2:9, to be punished. As to number 4, concerning the transmission of diseases from one to another, do you recall Jesus saying to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan," Matthew 16:23, when Peter rebuked him about saying that he, Jesus, would have to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and be killed and be raised the third day? Well, Peter was possessed of a satanic spirit at that time. However, this same satanic spirit later left Peter, Luke 22:31-32, and entered into Judas, Luke 20:2-3, which clearly points up the similarity in the transmission of disease and the transmission of the satanic spirits. In reference to number 5, the author has already shown the time that the devil or Satan entered Judas, Luke 22:3, but it was not until the night of the Passover supper that he actually showed signs of the devil being in him. That is, when he actually kissed Jesus on the cheek and subsequently betrayed him into the hands of his enemies. One can readily see the similarity of this situation to that of diseases having an incubation period before symptoms are evidenced. Referring to number 6, there is no doubt in anyone's mind that Pharaoh of Egypt was possessed of the devil, and it is also known that the longer the devil stayed in Pharaoh, the harder his heart became. Even when he finally released the Israelites, he gave chase and met his death by drowning in the Red Sea. So it is with a disease. The longer it stays in a body unabated, the harder it is to uproot, and will often lead to the death of the individual. Now, turning to number 7, which refers to a disease of one organ spreading to another organ, there appears to be a repetition of number 4. However, in this instance, the author is referring to the nature of satanic spirits to spoil or defile those persons who have once been freed from Satan. Seeing that all of us were born in sin, Paul speaks of it in this wise. Know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? 1 Corinthians 5:6. Here he was admonishing the Corinthians for having fornicators among them. Likewise, one diseased organ can damage or disease another or others. In another place, Paul, in speaking of this ability of satanic spirits to spoil those who have been partakers of the gospel, ask the Galatians, O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, that ye should not obey the truth? Are you so foolish? Having begun in the spirit, are ye now made perfect by the flesh? Gal 3:1-3. As we move on to number 8, which refers to the ability of a disease condition to recur, and thus bring about a worse condition than the initial one. Again, Paul, speaking of this, states that it is impossible to renew those again unto repentance who have once tasted of the heavenly gift and who were once enlightened if they should fall away. Hebrews 6:4-6. Jesus also taught the same thing in speaking by a parable to the Pharisees. He said, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and finding none, he saith, I will return unto my house whence I came out. And when he cometh, he findeth it swept and garnished. Then goeth he, and taketh to him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in, and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Yes, there is no doubt that diseases portray satanic spirits in our bodies. In enlarging upon number 9, which states that diseases are hereditary, and passed along from generation to generation in a family tree, Jesus said, in reproving the unbelieving Jews, Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it. John 8:44. This is adequate proof that some of us are destined to play the satanic role, and there is nothing we can do about it. This role has been passed down to us from our fathers, or was inherited. Paul, the apostle, elaborating on this point, said in Romans 9:21, hath not the potter power over the clay, of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor, and another unto dishonor? So it is that the satanic role can be inherited or passed down from one generation to another, just as diseases are so done. Now let us go on to specifics. Since there is the mystery of iniquity, and since iniquity is manifested in our physical bodies by disease, there must be a disease which afflicts mankind, which is still a mystery or unsolved as to the cause and the cure. Accordingly, since there is a principal iniquitous force, Satan himself, who is aided and abetted by his ministers or satanic angels, then it is necessarily a fact that the disease which represents Satan must be the number one killer of all and all other disease secondary to it in killing power. In a consideration of the leading cause of death in all age groups, the nod will have to go to cancer as the number one killer. There is one person in the world today who is the personification of Satan himself, and that person is hidden as far as the understanding of the people is concerned. This particular individual is not a bad individual as far as flesh and blood go, but his body is the dwelling place of the prince of devils himself, Satan. This is unknown by the teeming millions of people, but the Bible speaks of it thusly, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, shewing himself that he is God. 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4. And again, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 603 Revelation 13:18. So, one can see that the Bible bears out the fact that there is such a man in the world today who is leading millions of people to a spiritual death. Such a man is hard to recognize or detect, for he does not go around with horns sticking out on his head, or does he carry a pitchfork in his hands, for Satan is transformed into an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:14, and so are his ministers. So, you can see by the above comments that Satan is hidden and disguised in such an exalted personality. The author need not tell you that cancer follows the same pattern. Its cause and cure are unknown. It afflicts mankind in such a stealthy fashion that one is unaware that he has the disease until it is too late. It is insidious in its onset, is not a respecter of persons, afflicts the young and the old alike, and deals death to practically all its afflicts. Can one deny the justice of God in showing us all of these things? And what excuse will we use when we face the judgment seat of Christ? You be the judge of this, for God has said that man is without excuse. It is no wonder that man has not found the cause of cancer, for he has not discerned these satanic spirits which are inhabiting physical bodies. The scientists have done extensive research. 2. In the realm of determining whether or not cancer is contagious, and the preponderance of proof is that it is not contagious, despite animal experiments to the contrary. Yet, when one has his eyes opened by the Spirit of God, he sees that cancer must be contagious, representing the satanic element as it does, for it is by associating and mingling with those possessed of the devil that we become so afflicted. We are admonished throughout the scriptures to flee from the devil as if he were a contagion. Let us look around us for these evil spirits hiding in physical bodies, and let us not look for them necessarily in the so-called bad folks of the world, for as it has already been set forth in this book, Satan is disguised as an angel of light. So, let us examine the ecclesiastical and religious groups of the world, and mind you, examine those groups which are wielding the most influence in the world today, and who set themselves up as the leaders. After looking at the leading ecclesiastical groups, let us examine their leaders and heads to whom they bow down, and who dictate to them, telling them what to eat, and whom to marry. 1 Timothy 4:1-5. When one finds such a person or persons who sits on a throne exalting himself as God in this present world, then one is discerning the son of perdition who is to be revealed before long to everyone. These are the false prophets who are to appear in the end of this age and who would deceive many. If we could learn to flee from these false prophets and fear them just as we fear cancer, which is a manifestation of them, we would be saved from the death and destruction that is to come. Who is it in the world today that does not fear cancer? The fear and dread of cancer has become so rampant that it almost amounts to another disease itself. That is cancerophobia, fear of cancer. The Bible says, however, to fear not those who can kill the body only, but rather fear those who can kill the body and the soul and cast it into hell. So why fear cancer? Rather fear the devil who is masquerading as a great religious head. Cancer kills the body, it is true, but the devil kills the spirit and causes it to be cast into hell. Now let us examine a specific manifestation of the way that the satanic spirit works, and let us see how just God has been to manifest these things to us. If you are old enough, you may recall the influenza pandemic of the summer and autumn of 1918, when about 2 to 3 million persons died in Europe and America. It must have been an awesome spectacle to see bodies piled up on top of one another waiting to be buried, and to see the grief-stricken families everywhere. Doctors were helpless against this catastrophe, and only the Spirit of God was able to save one from this affliction. The word influenza means influence. The cause of this condition is unknown. Mind you, this type of influenza was called Spanish influenza. Nearly everyone knows the religious organization that dominates Spain. It is practically 100% taken over by a certain religious group headed by a thronely potentate. If you will now substitute the name of this religious group for the word Spanish, and substitute the word influence for influenza, then you will understand what the pandemic of 1918 means. God was showing us who are enlightened by his Spirit that by means of the satanic influences, many millions of people are being spiritually killed, and he was so just as to point the finger right at a particular group. Now, as there are all kinds of diseases, there are all kinds of satanic forces, so that one should not think that this particular group is alone in this respect. There is one other point to be made in reference to the influenza pandemic of 1918. Doctors and scientists admit that those persons who were users of alcohol, which is a spirituous fluid, were invulnerable to the disease, or were saved from becoming infected. Why was this so? Our doctors and other medical personnel cannot explain it. Well, the alcohol was only a type or a figure of the Spirit of God, for every doctor knows that alcohol does not prevent or cure influenza. It was made to appear that way in the pandemic of 1918 to manifest to us the truth. God used a spiritus fluid alcohol to denote a spirit, the Spirit of God. Thus, the only thing that can save us from the influence of the devil is the Spirit of God. One other point should be made about this great catastrophe. Many persons of the present generations are ignorant of God showing his wrath through pestilence, famine, or the sword, as we have read accounts of in the Bible. God is still the author of the great tragedies that fall upon mankind, but we are ignorant of that fact, for we readily try to explain every such happening along so-called scientific lines. We called in our experts who scratch their heads and come up with some plausible reason which we accept, never discerning that these happenings are manifestations of God's wrath. God's wrath is as great as his love. There is always someone talking about the love of God, but hardly ever do you hear one speak of the wrath of God. If one is a true believer and is possessed of the Holy Spirit, he discerns that these plagues, destructive earthquakes, devastating tornadoes, and other death-dealing tragedies are manifestations of the wrath of God. See Romans 1:18. Our God is not asleep, but he is a living God, watching and observing the ways of man and punishing him for his disobedience, just as he did in days of old. One of the medical colleagues of the author met him in a hospital corridor recently and was apparently quite concerned about an article which he had lately read in one of the medical journals of chest diseases, citing the alarming increase in lung cancers. He stated that the article plainly stated, on the basis of medically known facts, that smoking was a cause of lung cancer and that it had already become the leading cause of death from cancer. He said further that it completely outranked all other forms of cancer as far as mortality was concerned, and that in a couple of decades it would cause more deaths than all of the other forms of cancer put together. What is the meaning of all this? If the visible things are to reflect the invisible things so that man can understand and therefore have no excuse, Romans 1:20, then there must be an explanation for the above-mentioned situation. Before we begin to unravel this mystery, let us clearly set forth in our minds the following facts. Cancer is a disease state or condition. 2. Cancer is an abomination, that is, it is abhorred or strongly disliked by everyone. 3. Cancer does kill, that is, it drives the life out of the tissues that it attacks and thereby makes them desolate as far as their normal functioning is concerned. It is very important to recall at this point how the physical body is divided into 3 parts, topographically, as explained in an earlier chapter of this book, corresponding to the 3 parts of the tabernacle which was built in the wilderness of Sinai. It was stated earlier that the cranial cavity corresponded to the most holy place of the tabernacle, the chest cavity to the holy place, and the abdominal cavity to the court around about. Jesus, during the days of his ministry, told his disciples of the things that would be signs of the end of the world. Matthew's records of his words are as follows. Matthew 24:15-16. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Mark records his words thusly. Mark 13:14. But when ye shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. Luke records Jesus' words accordingly. Luke 21:20-21. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. Please notice in 2 of the above versions the earnest desire expressed by Jesus that whoever reads these words understand them. For it is through an understanding of these words that one discerns what is happening right under his nose and further understands the critical period in which he is now living. Before we can understand what Jesus is talking about, we must first learn that of which Daniel the prophet spoke. And needless to say, one cannot understand Daniel's words without a prior knowledge of the previous facts, such as the following. Adam sinned and left all mankind in a lost state, and God destroyed the world by a flood in Noah's time because of its wickedness. God made a promise to Abraham, a descendant of Shem, one of Noah's sons and a survivor of the flood, that in his seed he would bless all of the families of the earth and gave him Canaan land as an inheritance. God chose these descendants of Abraham through Isaac, his son, as his people. These Israelites journeyed down into Egypt, where they were at first favored, then later they were placed in bondage, and after 400 years of such servitude were brought out of Egypt by the strong arm of God with Moses leading them. They crossed through the parted waters of the Red Sea into the wilderness of Sinai and were given various laws and commandments, which they were to carry out. They disobeyed these commandments, and consequently, every one of them which came out of Egypt except Caleb and Joshua were destroyed by God in the wilderness. After 40 years of sojourning in the wilderness, the offspring of those who came out of Egypt crossed over into Canaan land through the parted waters of the Jordan River with Caleb and Joshua, after subduing the heathen kingdoms. There in Canaan land, the Israelites settled down and prospered as long as they followed God's laws and commandments, and suffered physical and materialistic decadence when they did not. They became increasingly more sinful as the years rolled by. God had chosen Jerusalem as a holy place where the Israelites were to come to worship before him, and Solomon had built a magnificent temple there, where prayers and supplications were to be made. These two places, the city of Jerusalem and the temple, were holy places consecrated to the service of God. Now, the time had come during Daniel's days when Israel had become so corrupt that the heathens, whom they had formerly subdued, began to invade their lands because God had turned his back on the Israelites. They, the Israelites, were taken captive into Babylon, and Jerusalem, the holy city, was left desolate, not entirely desolate for the want of people, but desolate from the standpoint of anyone calling upon the name of the God of gods. The holy temple had been ravaged, and all of the holy vessels were taken out, and altars on which incense was burned to idols were set up. Yes, the satanic forces had really taken over the holy places of God in Daniel's time, for he was an Israelite captive in Babylon. Daniel, the prophet, therefore wrote of this desolate condition of Jerusalem, which had been prophesied by Jeremiah, the prophet, Daniel 9:2. The physical temple spoken of in the previous lines is figurative of your physical body, a spiritual place, as seen by John in Revelation 21:2. God dwelleth not in temples made by hands, Acts 7:48, but dwelleth in each of us. 1 Corinthians 6:19 says, What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? Also, 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Now, if one's body is supposed to be the temple of God, and instead of its being an abode of God, it is the abode of the devil, then it is desolate as far as God is concerned. The devil is the abomination which stands in the holy place, for each of our bodies is a consecrated and redeemed place of God. Through his Son, Jesus, he paid the price for the redemption of us all, and we should present our bodies as a living sacrifice unto the Lord, which is our reasonable service. Romans 12. Now, when ye shall see the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not, Mark 13:14, that is, when one sees the satanic spirits inhabiting these physical bodies, then flee to the mountains. It has already been brought out in this book that the diseased state parallels the satanic state or is a visible manifestation of the satanic state. God said in Jeremiah 3:1-31 that after those days, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, he would put his laws in men's hearts and in men's minds. If the Spirit of God dwells not in one's heart and mind, then the devil does. Cancer, therefore, being a figure of the satanic, has progressed to the point where it now occupies the holy place, the chest cavity, to a considerable degree, and through its ravages is making the temple of God, the body, desolate. Notice the rise of cancer in the last few years paralleling the rise in worldly sin. It is an abomination, and it is standing in the holy place. Incense is being burned in the temple of God to the idols, sending up an ill-smelling smoke, that is, people are worshiping the devil in their hearts and in their minds. The smoke of incense being burned to idol gods bears the same relationship as smoking does to cancer. The more smoking, the more cancer, the more incense burning, the more idolatry or sin. One cannot stop the ravages of lung cancer because it is paralleling the ravages of the corrupt and sinful conditions in which we now live. As the people were warned to flee to the mountains, when they saw such a condition prevailing, it is ample warning for us of this present generation to flee from the wrath of God that is to shortly come upon us. Whoso readeth, let him understand.